I'm the executive privilege. I don't have to answer that. News media asked me a question, executive privilege. Well, I don't have to answer that. Hi, folks. How are you? Great to have you here. Already hump day. The Excellence in Broadcasting Network. You want to hear some irony? By the way, telephone number 800-282-2882. What was Fast and Furious? I'm assuming everybody knows that Obama has asserted executive privilege to protect himself, not just Eric Holder, but to protect himself from being discovered somehow, to be involved in his Fast and Furious. And what was Fast and Furious? As simply put, as I can make it, Fast and Furious was an American government program authored by the Obama administration to arm violent drug gangs in Mexico with American weapons from Arizona, primarily. Assault rifles and deadly weapons were purchased from gun stores in Arizona and walked across the border to Mexico on purpose. This resulted in the death of scores of people, including a man named Brian Terry, a border agent for our government. Now, we all know what the purpose of this was. The purpose of this was to gin up anti-Amendment 2 sentiment among the people in this country. The objective was, and this is where the irony steps in, the objective was to have news stories where everybody was shocked and stunned and saddened. Guns purchased by drug cartel members in America. Look how easy it was. End up in Mexico, owned by violent drug gangs and used in the commission of heinous crimes. Why, our gun laws are too lax. The sentiment in this country among the people is to maintain the Second Amendment. The American people don't want, by a vast majority, any gun control legislation. But that doesn't matter to people like President Kardashian or Eric Holder or any of the Democrat Party or the left. They don't want you to have guns. And so it doesn't matter about the Constitution, and it doesn't matter about the will of the American people. If they don't want you to have guns, they're going to try to find a way to make sure that you don't. And that's what Fast and Furious was, as simply put as I can make it. Obama has dragged this on for years. He has never had any intention of cooperating, nor has Holder. It was the arming of violent gangs in Mexico with American weapons purchased in American gun stores, resulting in the death of scores of people. Obama has never explained the details of what occurred to anybody, not the media, not investigators, not Congress. He is the head of the executive branch, so he asserts executive privilege. Meanwhile, he pretends that he knew nothing, but he's trying to protect himself. Now, what triggered this today is also very simple. Darrell Issa's Congressional Committee has been attempting to get documents from the Department of Justice to document this. And Eric Holder has refused to turn over the documents. They have been negotiating back and forth. There was a scheduled face-to-face meeting. Holder claims that he made one of the greatest offers in American history to share information, the executive branch and the legislative branch. But here is the bottom line. The Department of Justice lied to Issa's committee. February 4th, 2011, the Department of Justice, that's Holder, sent a letter to Congress in which they stated that the allegation that ATF sanctioned or otherwise knowingly allowed the sale of assault weapons to straw purchasers to begin transporting them to Mexico is false. That was a lie. The DOJ sent a letter to Issa's committee that was not true. In their letter, they said ATF makes every effort to interdict weapons that have been purchased illegally and prevent their transportation to Mexico. Now, a member of Congress, Issa's committee member, said, "We know that multiple people in the Department of Justice were involved in drafting this letter, and we know that their statement was false." So the Department of Justice, where the law of this land is to be the most stringently administered, adhered, obeyed, enforced, lied to Congress. And that is what this controversy is all about. That's why Issa wanted documents from Holder. That's why Holder wasn't going to, and it was Holder who called Obama either last night or today, asked for executive privilege, and Obama granted it. Now, the irony of this is that the whole point of this operation was for all of this to become public, except for Obama and Holder's involvement, and for you to be so angry about it that you would demand tighter gun control laws. Well, now the whole thing has become public, and now they've got to do everything they can to try to keep it under wraps. They wanted this thing public. They wanted the results of this brilliantly conceived, but it was not flawlessly executed. They botched the execution. Way too many people. The border agent died on December 10th. And so now the Department of Justice, part of the executive branch, Eric Holder and Obama have claimed, well, Obama is the only one who can, has claimed executive privilege. Now, look, folks, I'm not a lawyer. My dad was a lawyer out there. And as far as I know, executive privilege has been traditionally asserted to either protect the president's confidentiality, protect the executive branch's autonomy, separation of powers, or 3, to protect state secrets. There may be other reasons, but those are the 3 reasons I've always understood for it. So which of those is behind Obama's claim here? If the executive privilege is to protect confidentiality, then he's admitting his involvement in Fast and Furious. If he says it's to protect executive branch autonomy, should they have the kind of autonomy to do dangerous and illegal stunts like this? Now, I don't know that Obama would have the nerve to invoke national security after leaking all the secrets they just leaked. But you never know. Anything's possible with this bunch. Charles Grassley, senator from Iowa, has issued a statement. And it's pretty telling. I'm getting it now. His statement is this: the assertion of executive privilege raises monumental questions. How can the president assert executive privilege if there was no White House involvement? That's a pretty good question. Now, the executive branch includes the DOJ, but executive privilege, for example, can Holder call Obama and say, I want you to exert executive privilege for me, and have it not affect Obama? No. How can the president assert executive privilege if there was no White House involvement? How can the president exert executive privilege over documents he's supposedly never seen? That's another thing, Obama. He's never seen anything. He doesn't know what's going on. Is something very big being hidden to go to this extreme? The contempt citation is an important procedural mechanism in our system of checks and balances, says Grassley. The questions from Congress go to determining what happened in a disastrous government program for accountability, and so that it's never repeated again. Well, that's basically what this is all about. And I just, again, something very, very simple. On February 4th, 2011, the Department of Justice, Eric Holder, sent a letter to Congress in which they stated that this allegation that ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, sanctioned or otherwise knowingly allowed the sale of assault weapons to straw purchasers to begin transporting them to Mexico is false. They denied the program. They denied that Fast and Furious existed. They denied it in a February 4, 2011 letter to Congress. And in that letter, they say ATF makes every effort to interdict weapons that have been purchased illegally to prevent their transportation to Mexico. Now, it's known that multiple people in the Department of Justice were involved in drafting that letter, and Congress now says that the statements in the letter were false. That's, you lie to Congress, ask Roger Clemens. You lie to Congress like this, whether you think these guys are hoity-toity and far more important in their own minds than they really are. The fact of the matter is, when the executive branch starts lying to these guys, the red flags go up, and this is exactly what happened. So the Congressional Committee of Darrell Issa, we want everything you've got on this, and Holder's not going to give it, executive privilege. The White House is apparently now intent on hiding something, Obama's involvement, the further details of the program. But I have to tell you, I've looked at the media on this as well. They're gobsmacked. This is another thing. They were so out of touch. To them, Fast and Furious has been nothing more than a Tea Party right-wing extreme conspiracy theory. It's been something they've laughed about. They've not bothered to inform themselves. To them, it's just a joke. Fast and Furious is nothing more than a joke. Typical right-wing tinfoil hat people trying to get poor old Barack. And they're shocked. They are shocked that Obama asserted executive privilege. Remember, the big assertion of executive privilege that went down the tubes was Nixon and Watergate. A lot of presidents have asserted executive privilege. I think Clinton did 14 times. Bush did 6. So it's not uncommon. But the big one that led to the downfall of a president was Richard Nixon, because the Supreme Court did not allow him to assert it before challenge. He lost the claim of executive privilege at Watergate. So they know what can happen. And they're gobsmacked by this. They don't know how to report this. They thought it was a joke, folks. They thought it was nothing more than the Martians had landed. A bunch of people believe the Martians had landed. Now, they're already having second and third thoughts about Obama. They got Frank Bruni, I don't know how you pronounce his name, New York Times, with a scathing review of Obama's performance done at this G20 summit. Looked totally outclassed, looked totally out of his... Just looked like he had no business being there. It was embarrassing. No command whatsoever of his actions, of his presence. He seems small. This is the New York Times describing Obama at the G20. Then you have this Neil Monroe business. Then you have the leaks. You have Obama failing in the polls. You've got the Supreme Court might do away with Obama. They, in 2008, never envisioned 1% of what's happening here. And this, I'm telling you, Fast and Furious, they thought was a joke. And here's Obama asserting executive privilege. It's kind of like Angrier Mitchell. Well, we didn't have time to play the whole tape on Romney. Romney didn't want to scan her. They, folks, are struggling with how to defend their guy. Now they will. I don't have any question. When they get hold of themselves, the media gets hold of them, they predict to you what's going to happen. They will argue that they are upholding long-honored tradition of protecting the internal process of the executive branch. That's what the media will say about Obama. It's part of the separation of powers doctrine. They'll argue that ongoing investigation, congressional interference could upset the executive process. They'll be defended on this by the press. Don't misunderstand. I'm just saying right now, the press thought this was nothing more than the birthers. You know, something they think the birthers are a bunch of kooks. They think the Fast and Furious crowd's a bunch of kooks. And now, with Obama asserting executive privilege, what are they trying to hide? It makes them very uncomfortable.